Where's the shooter? Somebody tell me where the shooter is, Harper screamed it into the dark as his fourth man dropped, throat open by a round that came from nowhere. No muzzle flash, no sound, but a single flat crack rolling off the ice. Colonel Renko had promised his men this valley was theirs, had executed a wounded scout an hour earlier just to prove no one could touch him. Now Renko was face down in the snow with the rest, and something was moving under the frozen river, rising, and it was hunting them all one impossible shot at a time. Before we go on, please subscribe, follow this story to the very end, and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story has traveled tonight. Lieutenant Daniel Harper had walked into a lot of ugly places in his life, but he had never felt a cold quite like this one. It went past the skin, it went past the muscle. It reached down into the bone and squeezed, and it whispered a single sentence over and over that no amount of training could silence. You do not belong here. Comms check, Harper said into his throat mic, his voice low and flat. Sound off, White. Mitchell up. Patterson up. Reyes up. Doc Alvarez up. Cole up. 6 voices, 6 men. Harper counted them the way a father counts children in a crowded parking lot, quick and instinctive, needing the number to come out right before he could breathe. It came out right, for now. We move to the ridge, we confirm the target package, we get out before first light, Harper said. No contact, no engagement. This is a look and leave. Nobody fires unless I say fire. Understood. Understood. They answered one after another, the words swallowed almost instantly by the falling snow. Petty Officer Ryan Mitchell fell into step beside him, his rifle low and ready. Mitchell was the youngest of the group and the one who talked the most, though he had learned to keep it to a murmur. Lieutenant, he said, you feel that? Feel what? Like somebody's got a hand on the back of my neck. Mitchell rolled his shoulders under his pack. Been feeling it since we crossed the tree line. Can't shake it. Harper wanted to tell him it was nerves. He wanted to tell him that the human brain dropped into a place this hostile and this silent would invent a watcher just to have something to be afraid of. That was the sensible thing to say, the leader thing to see. Instead, he said the truth. Yeah, I feel it too. Mitchell exhaled and the breath came out white and shivering. That's not comforting, LT. Wasn't trying to comfort you. Engineer Kyle Patterson caught up on Harper's other side, dragging the thermal scanner in front of him like a divining rod. Patterson was the smart one, the one who could take any machine apart and put it back together with his eyes closed, and right now his machine was telling him something he didn't like. Sir, he said, I've got nothing. Define nothing. I mean nothing, sir. No heat, no bodies, no animals, not a rabbit, not a bird, not a deer. Patterson tapped the screen with a gloved finger. A valley this size, this time of year, I should be picking up something warm. Wildlife at minimum. There's 0. It's like the whole place died and forgot to fall down. Harper studied the flat gray screen and felt the cold reach a little deeper. Could the unit be malfunctioning? Ran the diagnostic twice. It's clean. The scanner's working fine. Patterson swallowed. The valley's the problem, not the scanner. Then we keep our eyes open and we trust nothing, Harper said. Move. They moved. The frozen river ran along the floor of the valley like a scar, down and pale and dead still, and Harper found his eyes drifting to it again and again without meaning to. There was nothing to see. It was ice. It was a river that had stopped being a river and become a road of glass. And yet every time he looked at it, that hand on the back of his neck pressed a little harder. Doc, Harper said quietly. You still with us? Still here, LT, Alvarez answered. The corpsman was near the rear, watching their 6 medical kits strapped tight against his ribs. Cold as a witch's heart, but here. Keep talking to me, all of you. I don't like how quiet this place makes us. It was Cole who broke the silence next, and Cole almost never spoke. He was the oldest man on the team, after Harper, a career operator with a face like weathered stone. LT, he said. Enemy patrol, bearing 045, count of 6, maybe 7, 200 meters and closing slow. Harper dropped to one knee and the whole team folded down with him like a single organism. Everybody down. Nobody breathes hard. Patterson, I thought you said no heat signatures. Patterson stared at his scanner, his mouth open. Sir, I still don't have them. The scanner's showing empty, but Cole's got eyes on them. They're right there. Then the enemy's running suppression tech that beats our thermals, Harper said, and the words tasted like a warning bell, which means this was never a look and leave. Somebody knew we were coming. Or somebody's hunting the same thing we are, Cole murmured. The enemy patrol crossed into view, six figures in heavy winter gear, moving with the loose confidence of men who believed the valley belonged to them. At their center walked a seventh taller, straighter, a man who did not carry his rifle so much as wear it, and Harper knew a commander when he saw one, even from 200 meters in the dark. That's the package, Harper breathed. The tall one. That's our target. We confirm, we photograph, we fade. Nobody so much as twitches. Mitchell lifted his scope with the slow patience of a man defusing a bomb. Confirm, Lieutenant. Facial match. That's Renko. Then we've got what we came for. On my mark, we pull back to the bureau. The tall man's head snapped sideways and he dropped. There was no warning. There was no muzzle flash, no crack of a rifle, no whistle of a round cutting the air. One instant, Colonel Victor Renko was standing at the center of his patrol, alive and certain and cruel. The next instant, he was a heap in the snow, and a fine dark mist hung where his head had been, and the sound of the impact reached Harper's ears. A full heartbeat later, a single flat thump that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. For 3 full seconds, nobody on either side moved. The enemy patrol stood frozen around their fallen commander, and Harper's team lay frozen in the snow, and the whole valley held its breath. Then the enemy started screaming. "Sniper," Mitchell hissed. "LT, somebody just took the shot. That was a kill shot. Perfect, right through the—" "I saw it," Harper said. "Where's the shooter?" "I don't know." "Find it, Cole, Patterson, anybody. Where's the shooter?" But no one could answer him because there was no answer to give. The angle of Renko's fall said the round had come from low, and from the left, from somewhere out on the open ice, but there was nothing on the open ice. No man, no rifle, no silhouette, just the flat, pale river stretching away into the dark empty as the surface of the moon. "That's not possible," Patterson whispered. "The nearest cover on that bearing is 400 meters out. Nobody's shooting from open ground in the dark and hitting a moving headshot. Nobody, sir." Somebody just did. The enemy patrol had scattered now, diving for cover behind rocks and drifts, firing wildly into the trees, into the shadows, into anything and everything. They were shooting at ghosts, and Harper understood with a cold that had nothing to do with the weather that they were as blind as he was. "They don't know where it came from either," he said. "Look at them. They're shooting at the tree line. They think it's in the trees." "It's not in the trees," Cole said. "How do you know?" "Because I've been watching the trees since we got here, LT. There's nothing in them." Cole's voice was very quiet and very steady, and that steadiness scared Harper more than panic would have. "Whatever took that shot, it's not up high. It's down low. It's down where we're not looking." A second enemy soldier fell. He had been crouched behind a boulder, safe, protected, firing into the dark, and then his body jerked backward and folded and did not move. And again, there was no flash, no crack, only that same delayed flat thump rolling across the valley like distant thunder. "2," Mitchell breathed. "That's 2 LT, same signature, no shooter, same impossible angle." "Different angle," Patterson corrected, and his voice was climbing. "Sir, that's the thing. The first shot came from the left. This one came from dead ahead. If it's one shooter, he just moved 150 meters across open ice in under a minute without leaving a track and without anybody seeing him do it. So it's 2 shooters. Or it's something we don't understand." Harper pressed his face into the snow and forced his heart to slow. Panic was the enemy now, more than the cold, more than the invisible shooter. Panic killed teams. He had seen it. A leader who lost his head, lost his men, and he was not going to lose these men, not tonight, not to a ghost. "Everybody listen to me," he said low and hard. "Whoever is out there is killing them, not us. Every round so far has gone into an enemy soldier. So we do not engage. We do not draw attention. We pull back nice and slow to the extraction point, and we let these 2 forces tear each other apart. This is not our fight anymore. Do you copy?" "Copy," they answered, ragged but obedient. "Then move. Cole, take point. Dock on our 6, slow and low." They began to crawl. And that was when Mitchell saw the ripple. LT, his voice had gone thin and strange. LT, look at the river. Harper looked, and for a moment he did not understand what he was seeing because it made no sense because it could not be. Out on the frozen river beneath the ice, something moved. A shape dark and long and deliberate, gliding under the surface, the way a shark glides underwater, unhurried, patient, alive. The ice above it was solid and unbroken, and yet the shape moved beneath it as though the frozen river were nothing but a pane of glass laid over a living current. That's under the ice, Mitchell said. LT, that's under the ice. Something swimming under the ice. Nothing swims in water that cold, Alvarez said sharply from the rear. Doc's medical opinion that water is well below freezing at the edges. A human being goes into that they have got 2 minutes before their body quits. 2 minutes, and that's generous. Whatever that is, it is not a person. Then what is it? Mitchell demanded. I don't know. The shape stopped. It hung there beneath the ice motionless, and Harper had the sudden and certain feeling that it was looking at them. Not at the enemy, at them, at his team, at him. Then a rifle barrel broke the surface. It happened so fast that afterward none of them could agree on exactly what they had seen. A crack appeared in the ice no wider than a hand, and through it rose the black length of a suppressed rifle barrel, and it held there for less than 2 seconds tracking, and then it fired, and a third enemy soldier died 40 meters to Harper's right. And then the barrel was gone, sliding back down through the ice into the dark water, and the crack sealed itself, or seemed to, and the river was still and pale and empty once more. 3, Cole said. His voice did not shake. Somehow that was worse. 3 kills, and now we know how. We don't know anything, Patterson said, and now he was the one shaking. That's the problem. That's the whole problem. A rifle does not fire from underwater. The casing floods. The powder's ruined. The mechanism seizes. It is physically impossible to fire a conventional weapon submerged and put a round through a man's chest at 40 meters. It cannot happen. It just happened. 3 times. Keep your voice down, Harper said. Sir, I'm trying to tell you whoever is under that ice is using equipment that does not exist. Equipment I've never read about, never seen, never heard, rumored. This isn't a soldier with a good rifle. This is somebody built for exactly this, for water, for cold, for dark. Patterson's eyes were huge. This is somebody who was made to hunt in a place where hunting is supposed to be impossible. Harper wanted to argue. He wanted to tell Patterson he was letting fear write the story. But he had watched a rifle rise out of solid ice and kill a man and vanish, and there was no arguing with what his own eyes had seen. Then we have an even bigger reason to leave, he said. Right now, move. They crawled faster. Behind them, the enemy patrol was disintegrating. What had been a disciplined unit of 6 soldiers around a commander was now a handful of terrified men, firing in every direction, shooting at the trees, at the rocks, at each other's shadows, screaming to one another in a language Harper half understood. And beneath the ice, the dark shape moved among them like a current, patient and precise, and one by one the screaming stopped. 4. The flat thump. 5. The forearm. The flat thump. They're all going to die, Mitchell said, crawling beside Harper, his face bloodless. Every one of them, and they can't even see what's killing them. LT, that's the worst way to go I ever saw. Getting killed by something you can't fight, can't find, can't even look at. Eyes forward, Mitchell. How do you fight something like that? How do you even start? You don't, Harper said. You leave. That's the whole plan. You leave. But the valley, it seemed, had other plans. Because as Harper's team crawled toward the fold of ground that would carry them up and out toward the extraction point, Cole raised a closed fist, and everyone froze, and Cole said the 2 words no leader ever wants to hear. More coming. How many? Harper breathed. A lot. Cole's stone face had finally cracked just slightly, just at the corners of the eyes. That first patrol was a scouting element, LT. This is the main body. I count better than 20, coming down the far slope. And they've got vehicles. Harper's stomach dropped. 20-plus enemy soldiers with vehicles pouring into a valley where his 6-man team was pinned between the incoming force and a ghost under the ice that killed men from underwater with a rifle that could not exist. Extraction, he said into his mic, keying the secure channel. Extraction, this is Ghost Team. We have a situation requesting immediate pickup over. Static. Then a voice thin and crackling. Ghost team extraction, be advised, weather has closed the corridor. We cannot fly into that valley until conditions clear, estimate 90 minutes over. 90 minutes, Mitchell repeated and laughed a horrible, cracked little laugh. We don't have 90 minutes, LT. We don't have 9. Extraction negative, we cannot hold 90 minutes. We have a superior enemy force closing on our position over. Ghost team understood, but we cannot fly blind into a valley with zero visibility. We will lose the bird and the crew. And you along with us, 90 minutes is the best we can do. Hold position and stay dark over. Harper closed his eyes. 90 minutes, 6 men, 20-plus enemy soldiers with vehicles closing in from one side and a thing under the ice that killed without being seen from the other. He had led men into bad places before. He had never led them into a place with no way out. Okay, he said, and he made his voice steady, made it certain because his men needed him certain even if he wasn't. Okay, new plan. We dig in. We find a defensible position. We go dark. We do not fire. We do not move, and we wait out the 90 minutes. The enemy doesn't know we're here. Sure, and as far as they know, they walked into their own ambush. We let them think that. We stay ghosts. And the thing in the river, Alvarez said quietly. Harper had no answer for that. They found their position in a shallow depression, ringed by boulders, a natural bowl in the earth that gave them cover on 3 sides with the frozen river, running past no more than 60 meters below. It was not good. It was the best they had. Nobody fires, Harper said again, pressing the words into each of them. Nobody. We are invisible. We are not here. Whatever happens down on that ice, whatever we see, whatever we hear, we are not here. The main enemy body flooded into the valley floor. Vehicles ground through the snow, headlights carving pale cones in the falling white, and soldiers spread out in a search pattern, and Harper realized with a fresh spike of dread that they were not just responding to the deaths of their scouting element. They were looking for something. They were looking for someone. They swept the valley with a purpose, and they swept it toward the river. They know, Patterson whispered. LT, they know about the shooter in the river. This whole force, 20-plus men vehicles, this is a hunting party. They came here to kill whatever's under that ice. That's the mission. That's their mission. Then this was never about us, Harper said slowly, understanding it as he spoke. We stumbled into somebody else's war. 2 forces, the enemy and whatever that thing is, and we're caught in the middle. So whose side is the thing on, Mitchell asked. Nobody answered because nobody knew. The enemy soldiers reached the edge of the ice and began to fire into it, spraying rounds down into the frozen river, trying to flush out what they could not see. And beneath the ice, the dark shape came alive. What happened next, Harper would try to describe many times in the years that followed, and he would never find the words. The shape moved. It surfaced through a crack in the ice for less than 2 seconds, fired and killed a man, and was gone before the body fell. It surfaced again 40 meters away, fired, killed, vanished. It moved through the frozen river as though the river were an ally, a weapon, a piece of equipment. It wore like a second skin, and everywhere it surfaced, a man died, and the enemy soldiers began to scream and fire and scatter exactly as the first patrol had. And their vehicles turned their lights toward the river and their guns toward the river. And it did no good at all because you cannot shoot what you cannot see, and you cannot see a ghost that lives under the ice. 6, 7. The flat thumps came faster now, overlapping a drumbeat of impossible death. That's not one person, Alvarez said, his medical mind still trying to build a wall of logic against what his eyes were showing him. One person cannot do that. The repositioning alone, the breath, control the cold. It's not survivable. It's not humanly possible. One person cannot. Doc, Cole said, it's one person. You can't know that. I can, because I've been tracking the movement pattern since the first kill. Cole's eyes never left the river. Same rhythm, same signature, same left-handed shot every time. It's one shooter, Doc, one. Moving under the ice, surfacing, killing, submerging, repositioning. One human being is doing all of this, and that scares me more than an army would. 8. The enemy commander who had replaced Renko, a broad man in a fur-lined hood, was screaming orders, now trying to pull his men back from the river, trying to form them into a wall of guns facing the ice. And for a moment it worked. For a moment they held. A line of a dozen soldiers all firing into the frozen river together, a wall of lead pouring down into the ice. and the shape stopped moving. The river went still. The firing trailed off. The soldiers waited, guns trained on the ice chests, heaving breath, fogging in the freezing dark. Nothing surfaced. Nothing moved. And the enemy commander began to laugh, a big triumphant bark of a laugh, and he raised his fist, and he shouted something that Harper understood well enough. "We got it. We killed it. It's dead." "They think they got it," Mitchell breathed. "LT, did they get it? Is it over?" Harper watched the still, pale river, and every instinct he had honed over a lifetime of war told him one thing with absolute clarity. "No," he said. "It's not over. It's setting them up." The shape exploded out of the ice directly beneath the enemy line. Not through a crack, not through a hole. The ice itself shattered upward in a spray of white and black, and the shape rose out of the broken river in the middle of the men who had been so sure it was dead. And in the space of 2 seconds, it fired 3 times, 4 times, 5 spinning, precise, impossible, and 5 men fell. And then it was gone again, back down through the shattered ice into the black water, and the frozen river swallowed it whole, and the surface sealed over as if nothing had ever risen from it at all. The remaining enemy soldiers broke. There was no discipline left in them now, no line, no wall, no orders. They ran, they dropped their weapons, and they ran screaming back toward their vehicles, back toward the slope, back toward anywhere that was not the frozen river, and the shape rose and killed them as they ran one after another, patient and relentless, until the drumbeat of flat thumps was the only sound left in the valley. 9, 10, 11, and then silence. Harper lay in the frozen bowl of earth with his 5 men around him and his heart hammering against the cold ground, and he counted the enemy dead scattered across the valley floor, and the vehicles sat abandoned with their engines still running and their headlights still burning, and there was not a single living enemy soldier left standing anywhere in that valley. An entire hunting party of more than 20 men gone in less time than it took to boil water for coffee, killed by a single shooter no one had ever clearly seen. 11, Mitchell whispered. 11 LT, and the scouts before them. That thing killed the whole force, by itself. "Everybody stay down," Harper said. "Stay down and stay quiet. The enemy's gone, but that thing is still out there, still in the river, and we do not know what it wants." "It never fired at us," Patterson said softly. "You notice that, sir, every single round went into an enemy soldier. Not one shot came near us. It knew we were here. It had to know. And it never fired at us." "Which means either it doesn't see us as a threat," Cole said, "or it's saving us for something." The river lay flat and pale and still below them, and the falling snow began to slow, and the terrible silence settled over the valley like a shroud. And Harper stared down at that frozen river, at the place where the shape had risen and killed and vanished 11 times over. And he waited and he watched, and he felt that hand press once more against the back of his neck, harder than ever before. Then out on the ice at the very center of the frozen river, a single crack appeared. It spread, it widened, and slowly, deliberately, without haste, something began to rise from the water. Not a rifle this time, not a shadow. Something rose all the way out of the ice and stood on the surface of the frozen river, upright, human-shaped, wreathed in mist, and it turned its head slow and certain until it was facing directly up the slope, directly at the shallow bowl of earth, where 6 seals lay hidden and unmoving and utterly exposed. It was looking at them, straight at them. It knew exactly where they were, and it had known all along. "Nobody move," Harper breathed, and his hand tightened on his rifle, even as he gave the order, because every part of him was screaming that a rifle would do no good, that his weapons meant nothing against the ghost that had just erased an army, that whatever happened in the next 10 seconds was entirely out of his hands. The figure on the ice raised one arm, and it pointed at Daniel Harper. The arm stayed raised, one gloved finger extended straight at Harper's chest, and for the space of 3 heartbeats, no one in that frozen bowl of earth so much as breathed. Then the figure lowered its arm, turned its palm flat toward the ground, and pressed the air downward twice. Slow, deliberate, unmistakable. "That's a hand signal," Cole said, his voice barely a scrape of sound. "LT, that's ours. That's a stay down signal. That's American doctrine." "You sure?" Harper breathed. "I've made that exact motion 1,000 times. It's telling us to hold, to stay flat, to not move. Cole's stone face had gone slack with something Harper had never seen on him before. Not fear, confusion. LT, whatever that thing is out on the ice, it just signaled us like a member of the United States military. Harper's mind raced. An enemy operator, some experimental weapon, some foreign ghost built for the cold would not know American hand signals, would not use them, would not in the middle of a slaughter pause to tell 6 exhausted SEALs to keep their heads down. Nobody moves, Harper said, but nobody fires either. Do you hear me? Fingers off triggers. That thing just wiped out 20 men and it hasn't touched us. If it wanted us dead, we'd already be dead. So we just lie here and let it walk up on us? Mitchell whispered, and his voice cracked halfway through. LT, I got a wife. I got a kid coming in April. I am not dying in a ditch getting my head blown off by a ghost. You're not dying today, Mitchell. Not on my watch, but you follow my orders or you get us all killed. Fingers off triggers. He heard the small sounds of 5 men obeying, and it cost each of them something to do. It because every instinct a warrior has screams to raise a weapon when death walks toward you. But they obeyed, because he told them to. And Harper felt the weight of that trust settle onto his shoulders like a second pack. Out on the ice, the figure did not walk toward them. Instead, it dropped back down through the shattered opening in the river and vanished, and the surface sealed, and the valley was still again. For a long moment, Harper thought that was it, that the ghost had decided they weren't worth the trouble, that they would simply lie here in the cold and count the minutes until the helicopter came. Then the ice cracked again 40 meters closer. It's moving toward us, Patterson said. Under the ice, it's coming up the river. LT, it's coming to us. Hold. Sir, hold Patterson, that's an order. Nobody fires. The crack appeared again closer still at the very edge of the frozen river where the ice met the snow-packed bank below their position. And this time the figure rose out of the water and did not sink back down. It climbed out onto the bank, dripping wreathed in mist, where the freezing air met the water that clung to the strange suit it wore, and it stood and it began to climb the slope toward them. Slow and steady, hands held out and away from its body, empty open showing them. It's showing us its hands, Alvarez said softly. LT, look, no weapon. It left the rifle in the river. It's coming up with empty hands. That's not an attack. That's a surrender posture or an approach posture. It's telling us it's not a threat. Everybody stay exactly where you are, Harper said. And then because someone had to, because he was the one who wore the responsibility, he made his choice. I'm going to meet it, alone. The rest of you hold this position and cover me. If it makes one wrong move, you do what you have to do. But not until I say, understood. LT, that's insane, Mitchell hissed. You don't know what that thing is. No, I don't. That's exactly why I'm going alone instead of sending 6 men into the dark against it. Harper rose to a crouch and every joint in his body protested the cold. If I'm wrong, you've still got 5 guns and a chance. If I bring all of us down there and I'm wrong, we all die together. Hold the position. That's final. He came up out of this bowl of earth with his hands open and away from his rifle, mirroring the figure's own posture, and he started down the slope toward the frozen river, toward the ghost that had killed an army, and each step felt like stepping off the edge of the world. They met in the middle of the slope, 10 feet apart, and stopped. Up close, Harper could see that the figure was smaller than he'd thought. Not small, but smaller than the monster his mind had built out of 11 impossible kills. The suit it wore was unlike anything he'd ever seen, matte and dark and seamless, wet and steaming in the cold, fitted tight to a body that was breathing hard, and Harper realized with a jolt that the breathing was ragged, uneven, the breathing of someone injured or exhausted or both. Identify yourself, Harper said. His voice came out steadier than he felt. You've got about 3 seconds before 6 SEAL rifles decide this conversation is over. The figure reached up with both hands, slow and careful, and pulled back the hood of the suit and peeled away the mask beneath it. Harper's breath left him. It was a woman, pale, sharp-featured, with dark hair plastered to her skull by the freezing water and eyes that were absolutely level and absolutely calm. The eyes of someone who had done this 100 times and expected to do it 100 more. She was young, maybe early 30s, and she was shivering violently now that the mask was off, and there was a dark stain spreading across her side, low on the ribs, that Harper's trained eye recognized instantly. "You're hit," he said. "Warrant Officer Sarah Vance." Her voice was low and rough and entirely American, and it landed on Harper like a physical blow. "United States. And yes, I'm hit. Took a round about 4 minutes ago, and I've been operating on borrowed time since. I need you to listen to me very carefully, Lieutenant, because I don't have a lot of talking left in me." For a moment, Harper could not speak at all. "You're American," he finally managed. "I'm whatever the mission needs me to be." Vance's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "But yes, I'm one of yours. Now lower your team's weapons before somebody's trigger finger gets nervous and does something we'll all regret." Harper keyed his mic without taking his eyes off her. "All units stand down. Weapons down. She's friendly. Repeat, she is friendly. Doc, get down here. We've got a gunshot wound." "LT, what the hell is going on?" Mitchell's voice crackled in his ear. "I'll explain when I understand it myself. Doc, move." Alvarez came down the slope at a dead-run medical kit already open in his hands and dropped to his knees beside Vance. And she let him though, her eyes never stopped moving, sweeping the valley, watching the tree line, checking the river, a hunter who could not turn off the hunt even while she bled. "Ma'am, I need you to hold still," Alvarez said, pressing gauze against the wound in her side. "This is deep. You're losing blood faster than I like. How are you even standing?" "Practice," Vance said. "That's not a medical answer." "It's the only one I've got," she hissed as Alvarez pressed harder, and then she looked up at Harper, and her calm cracked just slightly, just enough for him to see the person underneath. "Lieutenant, listen to me. The 11 I put down out there, plus the scouts, that's not the whole force. There's a second element, a reserve. They were holding back on the far ridge watching, and when their main body got wiped, they didn't run. They repositioned. They're circling around to hit your extraction point. They know where your helicopter is coming in. They've known the whole time." Harper's blood ran cold. "How do you know that?" "Because it's what I would do." Vance grabbed a fresh grip on the front of Alvarez's jacket, urgent now. "This was never a random patrol you stumbled into, Lieutenant. This whole thing was a trap. Not for you, for me. I've been operating in this valley for 6 days. They knew I was here, they just couldn't find me, so they baited a kill box and waited for me to spring it. Your team walking in was an accident, a variable nobody planned for. But now that you're here, they'll happily add 6 dead SEALs to the tally. They are coming for your bird, and they will be there before it lands." "That's not possible," Patterson said. He'd come down the slope behind Alvarez, unable to stay away, and now he crouched, staring at Vance like she was a math problem that refused to solve. "The extraction coordinates are secure, encrypted. There's no way a foreign force has our LZ." Vance turned her level gaze on him. "You're the tech. Patterson, right? I heard you on the ice wondering how I fire a rifle underwater. Here's a better question for you. If your comms are so secure, how did I hear every word your extraction bird said to you 40 minutes ago? How did I know your call sign is Ghost Team before your lieutenant ever said it out loud?" The color drained from Patterson's face. "You've been listening to our channel." "I've been listening to everything. And so have they. Your encryptions have been compromised for 6 hours. That's how the enemy knew you were coming. That's how they know where your helicopter's landing. You've been broadcasting your position into a dark valley full of people who want you dead, and you had no idea." Vance let go of Alvarez and pushed herself up onto her elbow despite the corpsman's protest. "So here's where we are, Lieutenant. Your ride is compromised. Your comms are compromised. A reserve element you didn't know existed is moving to kill you at an LZ you thought was safe, and you've got about 70 minutes on the clock. Now, do you understand why I revealed myself instead of just letting you sit up there and die?" Harper stared at her, and the whole shape of the night rearranged itself in his mind. Every assumption he'd made, every plan, every safe corner gone. He'd thought the danger was over when the enemy died. He'd thought the ghost in the river was the threat. And now this bleeding woman was telling him the real killing hadn't even started. "Why," he said. "Why reveal yourself? You could have stayed under the ice. Let us walk into the ambush. Nobody would have ever known you were here. That's your whole thing, isn't it? Never being seen." Vance was quiet for a moment. When she answered, her voice had lost some of its hard edge. "Because I've spent 6 years being a ghost lieutenant. 6 years killing men who never saw my face and dying a little every time I sank back under. And I have watched a lot of good people die because the mission said stay hidden. Her jaw tightened. I'm hit bad. I know how this probably ends for me tonight. And I decided that if I'm going out, I'm not going out watching 6 of my own countrymen get gunned down at a landing zone I could have saved them from. That's the reason. That's the only reason. Now, can we move, or do you want to keep asking questions until the reserve element gets here? Harper made his decision in half a second. Cole, Mitchell, get down here, he said into his mic. Everybody on me. Doc, can she move? She shouldn't, Alvarez said grimly, but she can. I've got the wound packed. It'll hold if she doesn't do anything stupid. Vance actually laughed at that, a short, pained bark. Corpseman, everything I do is stupid. It's the job description. Cole and Mitchell came down the slope, and Reyes behind them, the 4 of them forming a loose circle around Vanson and Harper. And Harper watched their faces as they took in the woman who'd killed an army from under the ice. Cole was studying her the way one professional studies another, with wary respect. Mitchell couldn't stop staring. Reyes had his weapon low but his eyes hard. So this is her, Mitchell said. This is the ghost. Warrant Officer Sarah Vance, Harper said. And she just told us our extraction is a death trap. Our comms are cracked, the enemy has our LZ, and there's a reserve force moving to kill us when the bird lands. So we're not going to the LZ, not the way they think. Then how the hell do we get out? Reyes said. That's what I'm about to figure out. Harper turned back to Vance. You've been in this valley 6 days. You know the ground better than anybody alive. Give me an option. Give me something. Vance dragged herself fully upright, one hand pressed to her side, and she swayed, and Alvarez steadied her, and she waved him off. There's a second clearing, she said. 2 clicks north on the far side of the river. Old logging cut, big enough for a helo sheltered from the ridgelines. The enemy doesn't have it because it's not on any map they'd have access to. It's not on any map at all. I found it on day 2. And how do we tell our extraction to meet us there when our comms are compromised? Patterson said. If we broadcast a new LZ, the enemy hears it too, and now they just move to the new spot. You don't broadcast it, Vance said. You use a channel they're not listening to. My channel. It's a closed loop, hardware encrypted, physically impossible to intercept without the paired unit. And there is exactly 1 paired unit, and it's back at a command post that answers to a program that doesn't officially exist. But it patches through to your chain of command in an emergency, and Lieutenant tonight qualifies as an emergency. Harper's mind was moving fast now, the pieces snapping together. So we relay through your command post. Give them the new coordinates. They pass it to our bird by a route the enemy can't hear. That's the idea. And the catch. There's always a catch. Vance's mouth twitched again. You're smart. I like that. The catch is that my comm unit is short range. Real short. To reach the relay, I have to get to high ground, the ridge on the north side, and I have to be there physically with the unit because it's keyed to my biometrics. Nobody else can transmit on it. And that ridge is exactly where the reserve element is moving through right now to get to your LZ. She let that sink in. So to save your team, I have to walk directly into the path of the men coming to kill you. Alone, Mom, because if all 7 of us go, we'll be spotted, and then nobody gets out. The circle went silent. No, Harper said. Absolutely not. You're shot. You'll bleed out on that ridge before you ever reach the relay point. Maybe, probably, but it's the only plan that gets your men home, and your men are the mission now. Vance's eyes were steady and clear. I told you, I already made peace with how tonight ends for me. This is what I'm for. You take your team, you move to the logging, you wait for the bird. I'll get you your extraction, or I'll die trying, and either way, you'll be on that helicopter. I'm not letting you walk into that alone. You don't have a choice, Lieutenant. You've got a wife and kid-coming young man over there who's terrified, an engineer, a corpsman, and 2 shooters, and every one of them needs to be moving toward that landing zone, not up on a ridge in a firefight I'm built for. And they're not. Vance's voice hardened. I have operated alone and worse than this. I don't need backup. I need you to get your people to safety and trust that I'll do my job. Harper looked at her, this bleeding stranger who'd fallen out of a frozen river and rewritten his entire night, and every part of him hated the plan, and every part of him knew it was right. There's another way, he said slowly. You get one of us to carry the load with you. 1 shooter to watch your back while you make the transmission. Not the whole team. 1, the rest go to the cut. That's a bad trade. You'd be sending one of your own to die with me for no reason. It's not for no reason. If you go down before you make that call, my whole team dies at the wrong LZ. But if there's a second person there who can take the unit off your body and finish the... Harper stopped. The unit's keyed to your biometrics. Nobody else can transmit. Now you're getting it, Vance said quietly. If I die before I make the call doesn't get made. That's why I go alone. There's no backup version of me. There's just me and the clock in that ridge. And that was when Cole spoke up in his low, graveled voice. Then we changed the math, Cole said. You said the reserve element is moving through the ridge to get to the old LZ. What if they didn't? What if something drew them off, slowed them down, turned them around, bought you a clear path to the relay point? Vance's eyes narrowed. You're talking about a diversion. I'm talking about giving them a reason to look somewhere that isn't you. Cole looked at Harper. LT, two of us peel off. We make noise on the east side of the valley. We make them think ghost team's trying to break out that direction. They chase it. The ridge clears. She makes her call. Everybody else moves to the cut. And the two men who make the noise, Harper said, how did they get out? Cole shrugged, a small movement of his stone shoulders. Same way she does. On our own. That's the job, LT. That's always been the job. Harper wanted to say no. He wanted to say that he wasn't in the business of trading his men's lives on maybe that he'd walk 6 seals into this valley, and he intended to walk 6 seals out. But he'd been doing this too long to lie to himself, and the truth was ugly and simple. There was no plan that got everyone out clean. There was only the plan that got the most people home, and the most people home meant somebody had to bleed for it. Okay, he said, and the word tasted like ash. Okay, here's how it goes. Vance, you move to the North Ridge and you make that call. Cole, you and Reyes run the diversion on the east side, draw the reserve element off the ridge, keep them chasing shadows, then break contact and E&E to the cut on your own. The rest of us, Mitchell Patterson, Doc, and me, we move to the logging cut and we hold it for the bird. Everybody converges on the cut. Nobody's a hero. Nobody dies. We all make that helicopter. That's the plan, and that's the outcome. Say it back to me. They said it back, one by one, and Harper heard the fear in some of their voices and the flat professional calm in others, and he loved every one of them in that moment, with a fierceness that scared him. Vance pushed herself fully to her feet, swaying one hand pressed to the wound in her side, and she looked at Harper, and something passed between them that neither of them had words for. You're a good officer, Lieutenant, she said. You care about them. I can see it. That's rarer than you'd think out here. Make the call, Vance. Get my people home. And then you get yourself home, too. That's an order, and I don't care what program you answer to. She almost smiled. I'll do what I can. She turned to go, and she'd taken 3 steps toward the river when Patterson said sharply, Wait. Everyone froze. Ripples, Patterson said, staring down at the frozen river. LT, there's ripples under the ice, downstream. Same as before. Same as when she was moving. He looked up and his face was white. But she's standing right here. She's out of the water. So if that's not her under the ice, the valley went absolutely silent. Vance turned slowly to look at the river, and Harper watched every trace of color drain out of her face, and he watched the calm professional certainty she'd worn all this time crack straight down the middle. That's not possible, she whispered. What? Harper demanded. Vance, what is it? I'm the only one, Vance said. Her voice had gone thin and strange. Wraith Protocol, the underwater program. There are supposed to be 4 of us, but 3 are dead. Confirmed dead. I buried 2 of them myself. I'm the last one. I'm the only operator on Earth who can do what I do in water this cold with equipment like this. There is not supposed to be anyone else in that river. She stared at the moving shape beneath the ice, and her hand drifted toward a knife at her belt because her rifle was gone. There is not supposed to be anyone else. Then who's under the ice? Mitchell said, his voice climbing toward panic. Vance, if it's not you, and it's not the enemy, and it's not one of your dead teammates, then who the hell is under the ice? Vance didn't answer. She was backing away from the riverbank now, slow and careful. Her eyes locked on the shape gliding beneath the frozen surface. And Harper had seen a lot of frightened people in his life, but he had never seen anything like the look on the face of a woman who just realized she wasn't the deadliest thing in the valley anymore. Everybody off the ice, she said very quietly. Everybody back from the river. Right now. Slow. Do not run. Do not make a sudden move. Back away from the water. They backed away. The shape under the ice stopped moving. It hung there directly below the spot where they'd all been standing, and Harper had the exact same feeling he had had at the very beginning of the night. The feeling that it was looking at them, studying them, deciding. "Vance," Harper said, keeping his voice as level as hers had been. "You're the expert here. You tell me, friend or enemy." "I don't know," Vance said. "That's what terrifies me. Because if that's one of my dead teammates who isn't as dead as the file says, then the whole program lied to me and I've been operating alone for 2 years, thinking I was the last of my kind when I wasn't." Her voice dropped even lower. "And if it's not one of mine, then somebody else built what they built. Somebody else has the technology. Somebody the United States doesn't know about. And that changes everything about tonight and everything about the next war and everything about what I thought I was." The ice cracked. The shape began to rise. "Weapons ready," Harper said, "but nobody fires, not until we know. Nobody fires." Slowly, deliberately, exactly as Vance had done, a second figure rose out of the frozen river and stood on the surface of the ice, dripping and wreathed in mist, clad in a suit identical to Vance's own, and it stood facing them across 40 feet of frozen water, and it did not raise a weapon, and it did not raise a hand, and it did not make a single sound. "Identify yourself," Vance called out, and Harper heard the tremor she couldn't quite hide. "This is Warrant Officer Sarah Vance, Wraith Protocol. Identify yourself right now." The figure reached up and pulled back its hood and peeled away its mask. And Sarah Vance made a sound Harper would never forget, a small broken sound like something tearing loose inside her chest. "No," she whispered. "No, no, that's not. You're dead. I buried you. I put you in the ground myself. You're dead." "Vance," Harper said. "Who is it? Who is that?" But Sarah Vance couldn't answer him. She was staring across the ice at the face of a ghost from her own past, a face she'd grieved and buried and carried like a stone for 2 years. And every certainty she'd built her life on was collapsing all at once. And the figure on the ice looked back at her with an expression Harper couldn't read from this distance, and out on the far ridge faint. But growing came the sound of engines. The reserve element right on schedule, moving to kill them all. And the clock that had never stopped ticking ticked on toward a dawn that suddenly none of them were sure they would live to see. "Say something," Vance croaked across the ice. "Marcus, if that's really you, say something. Say anything. Because the man I knew is buried under 6 feet of frozen dirt in a grave with no name, and I put him there, so you say something right now that proves you're him." The figure on the ice tilted its head, and when it finally spoke, the voice carried across the frozen river, low and calm and terribly familiar. "You put an empty box in the ground, Sarah." A pause. "There was never a body. You just never asked to open the casket." Vance staggered like she'd been struck. Alvarez caught her arm to keep her upright, and she didn't even seem to notice him. "That's a lie," she said. "I saw the report. I saw the Boston. You saw what the program wanted you to see." The figure took a slow step forward across the ice. "Same as I saw a report saying you'd washed out. Same as I spent 2 years thinking you'd quit, that you couldn't take it anymore, while they told you I was dead. They separated us, Sarah, on purpose. 2 Wraith operators who trusted each other are 2 operators who might start asking the wrong questions. So they killed me on paper and washed you out on paper, and neither of us ever knew the other was still breathing." Harper watched Sarah Vance's face come apart and put itself back together. Watched grief turn into confusion, turn into a slow dawning fury, and he understood that whatever was happening on that ice had nothing to do with him or his men, and everything to do with them, and that they had walked into the middle of a betrayal that went far deeper than one frozen valley. "Vance," Harper said quietly, "talk to me. Who is he? Is he ours or isn't he?" "His name is Marcus Kane," Vance said, not taking her eyes off the man on the ice. "He was Wraith, the best of us. My partner for 3 years. And 2 years ago, they told me he died on an operation in the Bering Strait, and they gave me a folded flag and an empty coffin, and I have grieved this man every single day since." Her voice cracked. "And now he's standing on the ice telling me it was all a lie. So no, Lieutenant, I can't tell you if he's ours because I don't know what ours even means anymore." Out on the far ridge, the engines were growing louder. Harper's clock was still running, still bleeding seconds, and no matter what was happening between these 2 ghosts, The reserve element did not care. It was coming. Kane, Harper called out. I don't know you. I don't know what happened to you, but I've got a reserve enemy element moving to kill my team in about 60 minutes to get 6 people out of this valley, and right now you're standing between me and a plan. So I need to know what side you're on. Simple question. You here to help us or here to stop us? Kane's calm eyes shifted to Harper for the first time. Neither, Lieutenant. I'm here for her. He nodded toward Vance. I've been tracking Wraith activity for 8 months, ever since I figured out the program and never actually shut down, ever since I realized they were still running an operator in the field. I didn't know it was Sarah until 3 days ago, and when I found out they still had her out here alone, being used up mission after mission until the day she doesn't come back. His jaw tightened. I came to get her out. That's the whole reason I'm in this valley. To pull my partner out of a program that was going to bury her for real this time. You've been in this valley 3 days, Vance said slowly. The kills tonight, the 11 men, that wasn't all me. No, Kane said, it wasn't. About a third of them were mine. I was working the far end of the river while you worked the near end. 2 ghosts hunting the same men, neither knowing the other was there. A grim, almost smile. We always did fight well together. Harper's mind was racing, but underneath the racing there was a cold, hard suspicion he couldn't shake. The suspicion of a man who'd been lied to by his own chain of command more than once. That's a hell of a story, Kane. Fake death secret programs coming to rescue a partner nobody knew was here. It's real touching. But here's what I keep landing on. You've been in this valley 3 days. You knew Vance was operating here, and you didn't make contact with her until now, until she was shot exhausted out of the water and standing next to 6 armed SEALs. Harper's hand drifted a fraction closer to his weapon. Why the wait? If you came to save her, why let her bleed first? The ice went quiet. Even Vance turned to look at Kane now, and Harper saw the same question take root in her eyes. That's fair, Kane said after a moment. That's a fair question, and you deserve a straight answer. He looked at Vance. I didn't make contact because I wasn't sure whose side you'd be on Sarah. 2 years is a long time. The program does things to people. It hollows them out and pours something else in. I've watched it happen. And I needed to know before I revealed myself whether the Sarah Vance in this valley was still the woman I knew, or whether she'd become the thing they wanted her to be. A tool that follows orders no matter what the orders are. His voice softened. Then I watched you break cover to save 6 strangers you had no reason to save. Watched you decide to walk up a ridge and probably die to get them home. And that's when I knew you were still you. That's when I decided to come out of the water. Vance stared at him, and Harper watched 2 years of grief and betrayal and confusion war across her face, and he had no idea which way it would break. Prove it, she said finally. Not with words. Words are cheap, and you always had a mouth on you. Prove it. There's a reserve element coming over that ridge to kill these men. You want me to believe you are still my partner, still on the right side of this? Then help me get them out. Right now, no more standing on the ice making speeches. You help me save them or you get out of my way. Kane didn't hesitate. Tell me the plan. And in that instant, Harper made a decision that went against every instinct of caution he had because the clock had run out on caution. Vance was going to the North Ridge to make a relay call on her comm unit and get us a new extraction point. But the ridge is exactly where the reserve element is moving through. She'd have to fight her way through them a lone shot to make the call. Not alone, Kane said. Not anymore. 2 Wraith operators can clear that ridge and hold it long enough to make a transmission. We've done harder with less. You're both shot, Alvarez cut in sharply. She's got a round in her side and you... He pointed at Kane. I've been watching you favor your left leg since you climbed out of that water. You're hurt too. Don't lie to me, I can see it. Kane glanced down at his leg, then back up unbothered. Corman's got a good eye. Took some shrapnel earlier tonight. It's not slowing me down enough to matter. That's what everyone says, right up until it kills them, Alvarez muttered. Harper cut through it. Enough, here's the revised plan, and we execute it now. Vance and Kane move to the North Ridge together. You clear a path, you make the relay call. You get us a new LZ at the logging cut 2 clicks north. Cole and Reyes still run the diversion on the east side to thin out the reserve element and give the Ridge team a better chance. The rest of us move to the cut and hold for the bird. Everybody converges. Everybody flies home. Are we agreed? Agreed, Vance said. Agreed, Kane said. Then move. We got maybe 55 minutes and that engine noise says the reserve element is closing faster than I'd like. Go. What happened next happened fast. Vance and Kane went into the frozen river together, two identical shapes sliding beneath the ice, moving upstream toward the North Ridge with a speed that Harper's eyes could barely track, and within seconds they were gone. Nothing left but a faint disturbance under the frozen surface, two ghosts hunting in tandem, the way they'd apparently once done before the program tore them apart. Cole and Reyes peeled off to the east at a dead run, low and fast, and Harper watched them melt into the dark with a tightness in his chest because he'd just sent two of his men to draw an enemy force onto themselves on purpose, and there was no guarantee he'd ever see either of them again. Mitchell, Patterson, dock on me, Harper said. We moved to the cut, fast and quiet. Let's go. They moved. For the first 8 minutes, they made good time staying low along the base of the ridgeline, crossing the frozen river at a narrow point where the ice was thick, pushing north toward the logging cut Vance had described. Harper kept the pace hard. Every second in the open was a second something could go wrong, and the whole night had been nothing but things going wrong. It was Patterson who spotted the first flare of a problem. Lieutenant movement, 10 o'clock, 200 meters. Harper dropped and the team dropped with him. Out across the snow, moving parallel to them, was a squad of enemy soldiers, 6 or 7 moving north the same direction they were. That's not the reserve element, Harper breathed. The reserve's on the ridge. These are somebody else. Where did these come from? Sir, Patterson whispered, and his voice had that tight, sick quality again. I don't think the enemy force was at ever 20. I think it was a lot bigger than that. I think we only ever saw part of it. They're heading for the cut, Mitchell said. LT, they're heading exactly where we're heading. If Vance's secret clearing isn't on any map, how do they know to go there? Harper's stomach turned to ice. There was only one answer and he hated it. Because our comms are compromised, he said slowly. And Vance just made her relay call. Or she's about to. And if the enemy cracked our encryption, maybe they cracked hers too. Maybe they heard the new LZ the second she transmitted it. Then we're walking into another trap, Mitchell said. LT, we're walking into the exact same trap at a different clearing. For a moment, Harper couldn't breathe. Every plan they made, the enemy was already there. Every safe corner already compromised. It was like fighting a war against an opponent who could read your mail, and Harper realized with a cold, sinking certainty that maybe that was exactly what was happening. Everybody hold, he said. Let me think. LT, we don't have time to... I said hold, Mitchell. Harper pressed his face into the snow and forced his racing mind to slow down. Compromise comms, an enemy always one step ahead, a trap at every landing zone. He turned it over and over, and then a thought surfaced, ugly and unwelcome. And once it surfaced, he couldn't push it back down. Patterson, you said our encryption's been compromised for 6 hours. Vance said the same thing, but she also said her channel was hardware encrypted, impossible to intercept without the paired unit. So how is the enemy at the cut? If her channel's really secure, they shouldn't know about it. Patterson went very still. Unless her channel isn't as secure as she thinks. Or, Harper said, and the word came out heavy, unless the leak isn't in the encryption at all, unless the leak is a person. The 3 men around him went silent. You think somebody's talking? Alvarez said quietly. You think one of ours is feeding the enemy. I think there are too many coincidences tonight, Harper said. I think an enemy force knew our exact insertion route. I think they knew our extraction point. And now they're moving on a landing zone that isn't on any map that Vance only found 3 days ago, minutes after she transmitted it on a channel she swears can't be cracked. That's not encryption failing, Doc. That's information walking out the door. And there are only so many people who've had that information tonight. You think it's Vance, Mitchell said, or Kane. I don't know who it is, but I know I'm not walking 3 tired men into a third trap on the word of 2 operators I met an hour ago. Harper made a decision. New plan. We don't go to the cut, not yet. We hold here, we watch that enemy squad, and we see what they actually do. If they set up an ambush at the cut, then somebody leaked it, and we've got a traitor. If they walk past it, then I'm wrong and we adjust. But I am done walking into rooms the enemy's already standing in. They held. They watched. and the enemy squad moved north past their position, and then 400 meters ahead at the tree line that Vance had said bordered the logging cut, the squad stopped and spread out and began to set up firing positions facing the clearing. There it is, Harper breathed. They're setting up an ambush at the cut. Somebody leaked it. Then we can't go there, Patterson said. LT, if we go to the cut, we die. But if we don't go to the cut, the bird lands, and we're not there and it flies off, and we're stranded in this valley with no extraction and a whole enemy force hunting us. I know, Harper said grimly. I know. And that was when his radio crackled, and a voice came through, and it was Cole. And Cole was breathing hard, and there was gunfire in the background. Ghost Actual, this is Cole. We've got a problem over. Send it, Cole. The diversion worked too good, Lieutenant. We drew off the reserve element like we wanted, but there's more of them than we thought, a lot more. And Reyes is hit. Cole's voice was tight with strain. Took a round through the thigh. He's mobile but slow, and we've got maybe a platoon on our tail. We can't shake them, LT. They're hurting us, pushing us somewhere. Feels like they want us to run a specific direction. Harper's blood ran cold for the third time that night. Hurting you which direction, Cole? North, LT. They're pushing us north. Toward the biome, a burst of gunfire drowned him out. Toward the logging cut. And there it was. The whole shape of the trap laid bare at last. They're not just ambushing the cut, Harper said slowly, the horror of it settling over him. They're pushing everyone toward it. The reserve elements hurting Cole and Reyes north. This squad set up to ambush the clearing. Vance and Kane made a call that told the enemy exactly where to spring it. And when that bird comes down, everyone converges on the cut all at once right into the kill box. He keyed his mic. Cole, listen to me carefully. Do not go to the cut. Repeat, do not go to the logging cut. It's an ambush. They're herding you into a kill zone. Break northeast, get to the high rocks, and hold there. Do not under any circumstances go to the clearing. LT, if I break northeast, I'm running Reyes straight uphill on a bad leg with a platoon behind us. I know what I'm asking, Cole, but if you run to the cut, you're both dead and so is everyone else. Break northeast, hold the rocks. That's an order. A pause and gunfire, and then Cole's flat voice. Copy, breaking northeast, Cole out. Harper let go of the mic and found three faces staring at him in the dark, waiting for him to tell them what to do, and for the first time all night, he genuinely did not know. LT, Mitchell said quietly. The bird's still coming to the cut. In, he checked 40 minutes, and nobody's told it not to. If it lands in that clearing, it flies into an ambush, and we lose the helicopter and the crew in our only ride home. We have to warn it off. We can't, Patterson said. Our comms are compromised. If we transmit a warning, the enemy hears it and adjusts. And we can't reach the bird on Vance's secure channel because it's keyed to her biometrics. She's the only one who can transmit on it. Then we get to Vance, Harper said. That's the answer. We get to Vance and Kane on the North Ridge. We tell them the cut is blown, and we make a new call, a third LZ. The enemy hasn't had time to set up on. It's the only way. He rose to a crouch. Change of direction. We're not going to the cut. We're going to the ridge. We're going to find Vance. That's straight through the reserve element, Lieutenant, Patterson said. The ones hurting Cole. We'd be walking right into the platoon. Then we go around them. We move fast and we move smart, and we find her before that bird lands in a trap. Harper looked at his three men, exhausted, scared one of them with a wife and a kid coming in April, and he made them a promise he wasn't sure he could keep. I got you into this valley. I am getting you out. All of you. Cole, Reyes, all of you. Nobody dies in this valley tonight. Do you hear me? Nobody. Now move. They moved hard and fast toward the North Ridge, and the clock kept running, and somewhere ahead in the dark, two ghosts were making a phone call that the enemy was listening to, and somewhere to the east, two SEALs were running uphill on a wounded leg with a platoon at their backs, and somewhere 40 minutes out, a helicopter full of Americans was flying steadily toward a clearing packed with men waiting to kill them. And Harper ran through the snow with his heart in his throat because everything, all of it, every life in that frozen valley now came down to whether he could reach Sarah Vance before the trap closed. They'd covered maybe 600 meters when Patterson grabbed Harper's arm and yanked him down. Lieutenant, the ridge, look! Harper looked up toward the North Ridge and his heart stopped. There was fighting up there. Muzzle flashes strobed in the dark, dozens of them, A running gun battle spread across the high ground, and in the middle of it, Harper could just make out two shapes moving with impossible speed, two ghosts back to back, fighting a force many times their number. And even as he watched, one of the two shapes staggered and went down. "That's Vance," Mitchell breathed. "Or Kane. One of them's hit. LT, one of them just went down." And Harper's radio crackled to life, and through a storm of static and gunfire came a voice ragged and pained, and unmistakably Sarah Vance's. And she said 6 words that turned Harper's blood to ice. "Lieutenant, don't trust him. Kane is..." And then the transmission cut to dead silence. "Vance," Harper barked into his mic. "Vance, say again, your last. Kane is what?" "Vance, come in." Nothing. Static. The dead hiss of a channel with no one on the other end. "She's down," Mitchell said. "OT, she got cut off mid-word. Somebody took her out mid-sentence. That's Kane." She said, "Don't trust him," and then she went silent. He turned on her. "We don't know that," Harper snapped. But the truth was he did know it, or half of it, and the half he knew was screaming at him. He'd felt it the whole time, that itch at the back of his neck, the too convenient timing of Kane's arrival, the story that was just a little too clean. Faked deaths. A partner who waited to make contact until she was wounded and cornered. A relay call that told the enemy exactly where to spring their trap. Patterson, that relay call Vance made, the one that told the bird to come to the cut, who actually made it. Patterson's face went slack. "You think Kane made it? You think he transmitted the wrong LZ on purpose?" "I think Kane was standing right next to her when she made that call. I think if anybody had a chance to sabotage that transmission to feed the enemy the coordinates, it was him." Harper's jaw tightened. It was never a leak in the encryption. It was never a traitor on our team. It was Kane. He's been the leak all along. He didn't come here to save Vance. He came here to use her, to use all of us. "Then everything he said was a lie," Mitchell said. "The program, the fake death coming to rescue his partner. All of it. Maybe not all of it." Harper stared up at the ridge where the muzzle flashes were thinning now, where the fight was winding down toward whatever ending was coming. The faked death might be true. The program might be true. But somewhere along the way, Marcus Kane stopped being ours. And tonight he walked back into Sarah Vance's life to finish something. I just don't know what. "LT Bart," Alvarez said quietly, "if Vance is down and Kane's the enemy, then the only person who could make a secure call to warn off that helicopter is either dead or working against us. And the bird's still coming. 35 minutes out, into an ambush at a clearing we can't reach and can't warn." Harper closed his eyes for 1 second. One. And then he opened them, because a leader doesn't get to fall apart, not while his men are watching, not while there's still one card left to play. "Then we get up that ridge," he said, "and we find out which one of them is still breathing. If it's Vance, we get that comm unit working and we save the bird. If it's Kane," he didn't finish, "we move. Now, fast and quiet. Doc, stay tight to Patterson. Mitchell on my 6. Go." They went up the ridge, hard lungs burning in the frozen air, and the closer they got, the quieter the fighting became, until by the time they reached the crest, the guns had gone silent altogether, and that silence was the worst sound of all. What they found on the high ground stopped all 4 of them cold. Bodies, enemy bodies, a dozen at least, scattered across the ridge in the postures of men who died fast and died surprised. 2 Wraith operators had come up this ridge and torn a hole through an entire platoon, and the evidence of it lay everywhere. But in the middle of it, at the very crest, one figure was still standing. It was Kane. He stood over a shape crumpled in the snow, and even in the dark, Harper knew the shape was Sarah Vance, and Kane held something in his hand, small and matte and rectangular, and Harper recognized it because Vance had described it. The comm unit, the one key to her biometrics, the only thing in this valley that could save the helicopter. Kane, Harper called out, rifle up his 3 men fanning out beside him with weapons raised. "Step away from her. Right now. Hands where I can see them." Kane didn't move. He looked up slowly and his face was calm, so calm, calmer than any man's face had a right to be standing over his bleeding partner in a field of the dead. "You're too late, Lieutenant," Kane said. "But then you were always going to be too late. That was the point. Step away from Vance." "She's alive," Kane said as if Harper hadn't spoken, For now, I didn't kill her. I want you to understand that. I've never wanted to kill Sarah. That was never the mission. The mission, Harper repeated, and his finger tightened on the trigger. What mission, Kane? Whose mission? Because right now you're standing over a wounded American operator holding a device that can save a helicopter full of Americans, and you're not using it to help them. So you tell me right now, whose side are you on? Kane looked down at the comm unit in his hand, and something crossed his face that might almost have been regret. You want the truth? Fine. You've earned the truth, all of you walking into a valley that was never meant for you. He drew a breath. Wraith Protocol was real. The underwater program was real. Sarah and I were real partners, the best they ever built. And 2 years ago, the program didn't fake my death to protect me from asking questions. It faked my death because I found something. I found out what Wraith was actually being used for. Which was, we were told you were hunting enemies of the United States. That's what they tell you. That's what keeps you sinking into freezing water mission after mission. You're a patriot. You're a ghost protecting your country from threats it can't even see. Kane's voice hardened. But the targets stopped making sense. A journalist here, a banker there, a scientist who'd published the wrong paper. People who weren't enemies of the country. People who were enemies of certain individuals inside the program. Wraith wasn't protecting America, Lieutenant. Somewhere along the line, it became a private murder service for men with stars on their shoulders and secrets to keep. And I found the proof. Harper kept his rifle level, but something cold was uncoiling in his gut, because Kane's voice had the ring of a man telling a truth he'd carried too long. So they killed me on paper, Kane went on, buried me before I could take the proof anywhere. And they kept Sarah because Sarah never asked the questions I asked. Sarah followed orders. Sarah was the perfect ghost. And for 2 years, they ran her mission after mission, killing targets she never questioned. And I couldn't reach her, couldn't warn her because to the world I was dead. He looked down at Vance's crumpled form. So I did the only thing I could. I went to the people the program was hunting, the enemies of those men with stars, and I told them everything. And I've spent 2 years helping them stay one step ahead of the ghost that was sent to kill them, helping them survive. You went to the enemy, Mitchell said, disgust thick in his voice. You're a traitor. You just admitted it. You've been working for the other side. I've been working against the men who turned a patriotic program into a death squad, Kane said sharply. There's a difference, son, even if it doesn't look like one from where you're standing. The men in that valley tonight, the ones Sarah and I killed, they weren't the enemy. They were a strike force the program sent to clean up loose ends, to kill me, to kill the people I have been protecting. And yes, to kill Sarah too, because after tonight, after this mission, she was scheduled to be retired, permanently. She just didn't know it. Harper's mind reeled. Every certainty had flipped and flipped again, and he no longer knew which way was up. You're telling me the enemy force tonight was American, was the program itself. I'm telling you, nobody in this valley is who your briefing said they were, Kane said. The men Sarah killed thinking they were foreign hostiles, program assets. Deniable contractors sent to sanitize this whole operation, including her. I came here to stop that, to get her out before they put her in the ground for real. His grip tightened on the comm unit. That part was true, Lieutenant. Every word of it. I came to save Sarah. I just couldn't tell her how deep it went, because if I'd told her the program betrayed her, that everything she'd done for 6 years was a lie, she'd have shut down. She'd have frozen, and a frozen operator is a dead operator. Then why did she warn me about you, Harper demanded. Her last words were, don't trust him. Why would she say that if you're here to save her? Kane's face flickered with something raw. Because I lied to her about the LZ. The words landed like a stone in still water. The relay call, Harper said slowly, the one to the logging cut. You changed it. You fed a false coordinate. I fed the real coordinate to a channel that reaches your extraction, Kane said. But I fed a false one to the program's listening post. I wanted them to think your bird was landing at the cut, so they'd send their ambush there, so they'd commit their forces to the wrong spot. It was a diversion to pull the enemy away from the actual extraction. He met Harper's eyes, but Sarah caught it. She saw me make a second transmission she didn't authorize, and she didn't understand it, and she assumed the worst. She thought I was feeding your position to the enemy. So she tried to warn you, and when I moved to stop her from broadcasting on an open channel that would have gotten us all killed, she took it as an attack, and we fought, and she went down. Not from my hand, from a program round that caught her in the crossfire while we were both distracted fighting each other. His voice broke just slightly. I've spent 2 years trying to save this woman, and I got her shot because I couldn't tell her the truth fast enough. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The wind moved across the ridge. Sarah Vance lay unmoving in the snow, and Harper stood with his rifle trained on a man whose story was either the most elaborate lie he'd ever heard or the most terrible truth. That's a good story, Kane, Harper said quietly. It's got everything. Betrayal, patriotism, a doomed love, a corrupt conspiracy. It's the kind of story that makes a man lower his rifle. His voice went hard. But I've been lied to by good storytellers before. So here's what's going to happen. My corpsman is going to move to Vance and check her, and you are going to hand him that comm unit slow, and then you're going to step back with your hands where I can see them. And if you're telling the truth, you'll do all of that without hesitating, because a man who came here to save her wants her saved by any hands that can do it. Kane looked at him for a long beat, and then slowly he knelt and he set the comm unit down in the snow and he stepped back with his hands open and away from his body. Take it, he said. Take the unit. Save your helicopter. I'm done being the reason people die. Doc, Harper said. Vance, go. Alvarez was already moving. He dropped beside Vance and his hands went to her throat, then to the wound in her side, then to a second wound Harper hadn't seen high on the shoulder, and his face was grim. She's alive. Barely. 2 rounds the side and the shoulder, and she's lost a lot of blood. LT, she needs a surgeon in the next hour or she doesn't make it. And that's the optimistic version. Then we're getting her on that helicopter, Harper said. Patterson, the comm unit. Can you make it work? Patterson snatched it up from the snow and his fingers flew across it, and then his face fell. It's keyed to her biometrics, LT, just like she said. I can't transmit on it. Only she can. He looked up, and she's unconscious. Time seemed to stop. Harper stared at the useless device in Patterson's hands, and then at Vance's still form, and then at the sky where somewhere out there a helicopter full of Americans was flying toward an ambush, and the whole impossible arithmetic of the night crashed down on him at once. The only person who could make the call was dying. The only device that could save the bird was locked to a woman who couldn't speak, and the clock was still running. Wake her up, Harper said. Doc, whatever it takes. Adrenaline, pain, anything. We need her conscious for 30 seconds. Long enough to make one call. LT, if I hit her with a shot of adrenaline in her condition, it could kill her. If you don't, a helicopter crew dies, and then we die, and then she dies anyway. Do it. That's an order, and it's on me. Do it. And then Kane spoke quiet and certain from where he stood with his hands raised. There's another way. Every eye turned to him. The unit's keyed to Wraith biometrics, Kane said. Not just hers, mine too. We were paired operators. The system recognizes both of us. It has to in case one of us went down in the field and the other needed to call for extraction. He nodded at the device in Patterson's hands. I can make the call. I can warn off your bird and route it to a clean LZ right now, tonight. All you have to do is trust me long enough to let me hold that unit. The silence that followed was absolute. That's convenient, Mitchell said. That is real convenient, Kane. The one device that can save us, and it just happens to work for you too. It's not convenient. It's how the program built us. Kane's eyes stayed on Harper. Lieutenant, I know how this looks. I know you've got no reason on earth to trust me. Every instinct you've got is it telling you I'm playing you, that the second you hand me that unit, I'll transmit your position to whoever's left out there and finish the job. And I can't prove I won't. I can't. All I can tell you is that if you don't let me make this call, that helicopter flies into an ambush, and everyone on it dies, and Sarah dies here on this ridge, and your 2 men out east die in the rocks, and you and your 3 run out a valley to hide in before the sun comes up. That's the math. That's the whole math. So you decide, Lieutenant, right now, because we are out of time. Harper stood frozen, rifle trained on the chest of a man he could not read, and he felt the full crushing weight of the decision settle onto him. Trust a self-confessed traitor, a man who had spent 2 years working with the enemy, and hand him the one device that could doom them all, or refuse and watch everyone die on principle. Lieutenant Patterson said softly, "The bird's 25 minutes out. If we're going to warn it, it has to be now. Another 5 minutes and it's too committed to divert." Harper looked at Vance dying in the snow, at Kane, hands raised calm and terrible, and possibly the only man who could save them all, at his 3 exhausted men waiting for him to choose. And he thought about every lie his own chain of command had ever told him, every mission that turned out to be something other than what the briefing said, every time he trusted the official story and been burned for it. And he thought about the fact that Kane, if he'd wanted them dead, could have simply walked away and let the ambush do its work. He hadn't. He'd stayed. He'd set down the unit. He'd offered. Doc, Harper said, not lowering his rifle. "How long does Vance have if we wake her versus if we let Kane make the call?" "If we wake her, we might get 30 seconds before the adrenaline stops her heart," Alvarez said grimly. "If we let Kane make the call, she stays under, and I keep working to stabilize her, and she's got a real chance. A small one, but real." That decided it. Not trust, not certainty, just the cold arithmetic of the only path that kept the most people alive. "Patterson," Harper said, "give Kane the unit." "LT, give it to him." "But Kane." Harper took 2 steps closer until the barrel of his rifle was 6 inches from Kane's chest. "You make the call. You warn off the bird, you route it to a clean LZ, and you say every word out loud so my engineer can confirm it. And if I hear one syllable I don't like, one coordinate that sounds like a trap, one thing that sounds like you're selling us out, I put 3 rounds through your heart before you finish the sentence. Are we clear?" "Crystal," Kane said. Patterson handed him the unit. Kane's fingers moved across it, and it chirped, recognizing him, and he brought it to his mouth, and Harper's finger rested on the trigger, and every man on that ridge held his breath. "Extraction! Extraction! This is Wraith, actual authentication. Kane 77? Charlie." Kane said, his voice flat and professional. "Abort primary LZ. The logging cut is compromised. Repeat, primary LZ is a hostile ambush. Do not approach. Divert to secondary grid coordinates as follows." And he read out a string of numbers slow and clear, and Patterson's eyes tracked everyone checking them against the map in his head, and Harper watched Patterson's face for any sign of a lie. Patterson gave a single tight nod. "Coordinates are clean, LT. That's a real clearing half a click east of here, sheltered, no ridgelines." "It's a good LZ, better than the cut. He's not lying." Harper let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. And then the comm unit crackled, and a new voice came through, and it was not the voice of the extraction pilot. "Wraith Actual, this is program control," the voice said, smooth and cold. "Authentication, Kane 77, Charlie confirmed. Welcome back, Marcus. We've been waiting a long time for you to surface and use that unit. Now we have your exact position." A pause. "All assets converge on Wraith Actual's transmission point. Kill everyone on that ridge. Recover both Wraith units intact. Execute." The blood drained from Kane's face. "No," he whispered. "No, the unit's not supposed to be traceable. They can't." "They just did," Harper said, and his voice was deadly quiet. "You told me your unit was secure, Kane. You told me it couldn't be traced. And you just broadcast our exact position to the program, keyed to your own biometric authentication, on a channel they've been monitoring for 2 years, waiting for exactly this. You didn't just fail to save us." Harper's rifle came up level with Kane's eyes. "You just called down every gun in this valley on our heads, so you'd better start talking real fast because from where I'm standing, everything Sarah Vance tried to warn me about just came true." And from the darkness all around the ridge, on every side, engines roared to life, and headlights snapped on dozens of them, ringing the high ground in a closing circle of light. And Harper realized with a sick lurch that the men they'd killed tonight had never been the main force at all, and that the real trap had never been the logging cut, and that Marcus Kane, whether he'd meant to or not, had just delivered every soul on that ridge straight into the hands of the people who wanted them dead. "Everybody down!" Harper roared, and the ridge erupted. The first rounds came in from the east, and Harper's men hit the ground behind whatever cover the dead had left them, and Kane threw himself flat beside the comm unit. And for one terrible moment, Harper thought this was it. This was where it ended. 6 SEALs and 2 ghosts pinned on a ridge with a ring of guns closing in. "Kane!" Harper shouted over the gunfire. You did this, now you fix it. Is there any way to kill that transmission, cut them off anything? The transmission's done, it's already out. They have us, Kane shouted back. But Lieutenant, listen to me. That voice on the unit that was program control, and there's only one place it broadcasts from. There's a command vehicle in this valley. Mobile CP, it has to be close enough to run the intercept in real time, which means close enough to hit. You cut the head off the assets, lose their coordination, they lose their targeting feed, they go from a coordinated kill to a bunch of scattered contractors in the dark. Where? Harper demanded. Where's the vehicle? Kane came up just enough to scan the ring of headlights, and then he pointed north and west at a cluster of lights that hung back from the others stationary while the rest advanced. They're the ones that aren't moving. That's the CP, that's the brain. Kill that and we've got a chance. That's 400 meters through open fire, Mitchell shouted. LT will never make it. And that was when Sarah Vance opened her eyes. Alvarez had been crouched over her the whole time, his body shielding hers, and now he felt her stir and looked down in shock. LT, she's awake. She's Vance. No, don't move. You've got 2 rounds in you. But Sarah Vance was already dragging herself up, her face gray, her hands slick with her own blood, and her eyes found Kane and then found Harper, and she understood the whole situation in a single sweep, the way only a woman who'd spent 6 years in situations exactly like this could. The unit, she rasped. Give me the unit, Marcus. Kane slid it across the snow to her without a word. Vance's bloody fingers closed around it, and it chirped, recognizing her, and she brought it to her mouth, and Harper braced for whatever came next because he no longer knew what side anyone was on. Program control, this is Wraith 2, Vance said, her voice steadier than any dying woman's had a right to be. Authentication, Vance 49 Delta. I'm the asset you sent to die in this valley. I know what Wraith became. I know about the targets. And I've got a helmet camera that's recorded every word Program Control has said on this channel tonight, including the order to kill a United States Navy SEAL team. That recording is set to transmit to 3 separate news organizations and 2 members of the Senate Intelligence Committee the second my heart stops beating. A pause. So here's your choice. You call off your assets right now and let these men walk out of this valley, or you kill me and the whole program burns tomorrow morning on the front page. Your move. Control. The gunfire faltered. Harper held his breath. It was a bluff. It had to be a bluff. There was no helmet camera. No dead man switch. Vance had been unconscious and bleeding out 30 seconds ago. But the voice on the other end of that channel didn't know that. And in the silence that followed, Harper understood that Sarah Vance had just done the bravest thing he'd ever seen, gambling every life on the ridge on a lie told with a rifle to her head. The channel crackled. Wraith 2, you're bluffing. You don't have a recording. Then kill me and find out, Vance said. Kill me and roll those dice on your career, your freedom, and the freedom of every man with stars who ever signed a Wraith kill order. You want to bet your whole life that I'm bluffing? Go ahead. I've got nothing left to lose tonight. Do you? Silence. Long, agonizing silence. And Harper watched the ring of headlights, waiting to see whether they'd surge forward or pulled back, whether the next 30 seconds held a rescue or a slaughter. The headlights held, and then one by one they began to withdraw. That's it, Kane breathed. They're pulling back. Sarah, they're pulling back. It worked. It's not going to hold, Vance said through gritted teeth. They're pulling back to reassess. They'll figure out I'm bluffing in about 10 minutes, and then they'll come back harder. We need to be off this ridge and on that helicopter before that happens. She looked at Harper. Lieutenant, your bird. Where is it? Patterson checked the comm unit. Diverted to the secondary LZ, half a click east per Kane's call. Bird's inbound, 8 minutes out. Then we move, Harper said. All of us. Doc can Vance travel. She shouldn't be alive, let alone traveling, Alvarez said. But if the choice is carry her or leave her, we carry her. Nobody's leaving anybody, Harper said. Cole Reyes, you copy. We've got a new LZ half a click east of the North Ridge, birds 8 minutes out. Break for it, now. Cole's voice came back through the static, ragged but alive. Copy, Lieutenant Reyes is slow, but he's moving. We'll make it. We'll make it, or we'll die trying. You'll make it. That's an order. Cole out. They came down off that ridge in a running fight, Kane and Vance covering the rear, with a lethal precision that made Harper's own men look like amateurs, even with Vance barely able to stand, and twice enemy contractors tried to close on them, and twice the two Wraith operators cut them down before they got within 50 meters. Harper carried Vance's weight across his shoulders for the last 200 meters when her legs finally gave out, and she kept the comm unit clutched in one bloody hand the whole way, her lifeline, her weapon, the only thing keeping the whole program at bay. They reached the secondary LZ with 90 seconds to spare, and Cole and Reyes came stumbling in from the east, 30 seconds after that, Reyes leaning hard on Cole's shoulder. Both of them alive, and Harper counted his men in the dark the way he had at the very start of the night. Mitchell, Patterson, Alvarez, Cole, Reyes, all six still breathing, plus two ghosts who officially didn't exist. Mitchell shouted over the rising thunder of rotors. Birds here, birds here. The helicopter came down out of the snow like a gift from a god. Harper wasn't sure he believed in anymore, and its side door slid open and hands reached out, and Harper started shoving his men aboard, Reyes first because he was hit, then Patterson, then Alvarez, then Mitchell, then Cole, and then he turned to Vance and Kane. You're coming, Harper shouted. Both of you, get on the bird. Vance shook her head, and even now, even bleeding out, even half-conscious, there was iron in her eyes. We can't, Lieutenant, she shouted back. The second we get on that helicopter, we exist. We show up on a manifest in a hospital in a system, and the program will find us, and they'll finish what they started, and they'll make sure the recording never sees daylight. As long as they think I'm out here with a dead man's switch, they can't touch any of you. But if I climb on that bird, the leverage disappears. She pressed the comm unit into Harper's hands, closing his fingers around it. Take this. It's proof, real proof, not a bluff. Everything program control said tonight, recorded on the unit's internal drive. Get it to people who can use it. Burn Wraith down. That's how you make tonight mean something. Vance, you'll die out here, Harper shouted. You're shot twice. You need a surgeon. I've survived worse in that river than a surgeon could fix, Vance said, and she almost smiled. And I'm not alone anymore. She glanced at Kane. Turns out my partner came back from the dead. We'll disappear the way we know how. And when the story breaks and it's safe to surface, maybe you'll see us again. Either way, Lieutenant. She held his eyes. You got your men out. All six. That's the only thing that was ever the mission. Now go. Harper looked at Kane. You still don't know if you're a hero or a traitor. Kane held his gaze, and something honest and tired passed across his face. Neither do I, Lieutenant. I've been both tonight, but I came to save her. And she saved you. So maybe in the end, it balances out. Now get on the bird and let two ghosts do what ghosts do best. Vanish. And Harper, because there was nothing else to do, climbed aboard the helicopter and watched through the open door as Sarah Vance and Marcus Kane turned and walked back toward the frozen river together, two shapes swallowed by the snow and the dark, and the last he saw of them was the two of them wading into the black water at the river's edge, sinking beneath the ice, disappearing into the current, and then they were gone. The helicopter lifted off, and the frozen valley fell away beneath them, and Harper held the comm unit against his chest like the most precious thing in the world. The debrief happened 3 hours later at a base Harper wasn't allowed to name, in a room with no windows, in front of men whose faces he would never see again. And it went exactly the way Vance had warned him it would. There was no female operator, the man across the table said flatly. There was no second operator. There is no program called Wraith. 6 men in, 6 men out. That is the entire record of tonight, Lieutenant, and it is the only record that will ever exist. 11 enemy soldiers were killed by a shooter operating from under the ice, Harper said. My entire team witnessed it. You want to tell me we all hallucinated that? I want to tell you that certain details of tonight's operation are classified above your clearance, and that if any member of your team ever speaks of a female operator or an underwater shooter or a program called Wraith, that team member will spend the rest of his career counting rifles in a warehouse in Alaska. Are we clear? And the recording, Harper said, the one where your program control ordered the murder of a United States Navy SEAL team. Are we going to talk about that? The man's face didn't change, but something behind his eyes did. What recording, Lieutenant? Harper reached into his jacket and he set the comm unit on the table between them, and he pushed it across. That's a copy, Harper said quietly. The original went somewhere else about 2 hours ago. Somewhere you can't reach it. And there are instructions attached to it, the kind that trigger automatically if anything happens to me or any man on my team. So here's how tonight actually ends. You leave my men alone. All of them. No warehouses, no accidents. My men go home, they get their honors, they live long, boring lives. And in exchange, that recording stays buried. But the day one of my men so much as slips on a wet floor, Wraith burns. Every kill order, every name, every star. Are we clear? The silence in that windowless room stretched long and thin. We're clear, the man said finally. Harper walked out and no one stopped him, and he understood as the door closed behind him that Sarah Vance had reached out of a frozen river and handed him not just proof, but power, the only thing men like these ever respected. Weeks passed. The valley faded into the place where all classified nights go half memory and half ghost story. Reyes recovered the round through his thigh, healing clean. Mitchell's wife had the baby in April, a girl, and he named her middle name Sarah. And when Harper asked him why, Mitchell just said, "Somebody saved my little girl's father, figured she should carry that." Cole went quiet in the way the old operators do. Patterson kept trying to explain the physics of a rifle firing underwater, until one day he simply stopped because some things he decided weren't meant to be explained. Then one evening in the early spring, the six of them gathered at a quiet bar in Virginia Beach. And Alvarez ordered a round, and when the drinks came, Harper raised his glass. "To the one who came up out of the river," he said. "We don't have a name to give. The record says she never existed. But every one of us is sitting at this table tonight because a ghost decided our lives were worth more than her cover. So we drink to her, whoever she was, wherever she is." And 6 glasses rose in the dim light, and 6 men who'd survived a valley that should have killed them drank in silence to a woman the world would never know. Harper carried it with him, and after that, and all of it, the cold and the ice and the impossible kills. He carried the not knowing too, whether Vance had lived, whether Kane had turned out to be the hero or the traitor in the end. People like Sarah Vance didn't leave answers. They left silences, and you learned to live inside them. It was 14 months later when Daniel Harper's phone rang at 2 in the morning. He'd left the teams by then, a training billet at Little Creek days that ended before dark. He answered on the second ring the way men who've led other men in bad places always answer a late call, already awake, already braced. "Lieutenant Harper," a voice said, female, steady, and something in his chest went tight before his mind even caught up. "It's been a while." He sat up in the dark. "Vance. Warrant officer, technically. Still, though the record still says I don't exist." A pause, and he could hear her almost smile down the line. "I need 10 minutes of your time, not on the phone. There's a diner off Route 60, the one with the blue sign. I'll be in the back booth. Come alone and come now, because I won't be there long." The line went dead. She was in the back booth exactly as she'd said, a coffee going cold in front of her, and she looked different than he remembered. Older. There was gray at her temples that hadn't been there in the valley. But the eyes were the same level and clear. The eyes of a woman who had spent her life in places humans weren't meant to survive, and had survived them anyway. "You look terrible, Lieutenant," she said as he slid into the booth. "Retirement doesn't suit you." "You look alive," Harper said, "which is more than I ever expected. We drank to you, you know. My whole team, we drank to the ghost who saved us." Something moved across her face. "I know. Kane told me. Kane's alive too." "Kane's alive." She turned the coffee cup slowly in her hands. "It turns out 2 ghosts who know how to disappear are very hard to kill. That's part of why I'm here. The recording, Lieutenant. The one I gave you in the valley. The one you used to buy your men's lives. It worked. Better than you'll ever know." "What did you do?" "I finished it." Her voice dropped, and for the first time he heard something in it that wasn't iron. It was exhaustion, the bone-deep kind. "You held that leverage over their heads for 14 months, kept your men safe, kept me and Kane breathing. But leverage like that, it's a stalemate. It doesn't end anything. It just freezes it. And a frozen war is still a war. I was tired of being frozen." She reached into her jacket and set a folded newspaper on the table and slid it across. Harper looked down at the headline and his breath caught. A defense contractor dissolved. 3 senior officers quietly retired. An internal review buried on page 11 using words like restructuring an oversight that meant nothing to a civilian and everything to a man who knew how to read between them. "That's Wraith," Harper said slowly. "You burned it down." "I burned it down, not the loud way. The loud way gets people like me killed and lets the guilty ones lawyer their way free. I did it the quiet way. I took that recording and all the proof Kane and I spent 2 years gathering, and I gave it to exactly the right three people, the ones with the clearance and the spine to actually act on it. And they took the program apart from the inside one thread at a time until there was nothing left." "It's over, Lieutenant. Wraith is dead, really dead this time." Harper stared at the newspaper, then at her. "Then why are you here? If you won, why call me at 2 in the morning?" "2 reasons." Vance's eyes stayed on his. "The first is that you kept your word. For 14 months, you sat on the most dangerous recording in the country, and you never used it for yourself. You used it for exactly one thing: protecting your men. Do you know how rare that is? In my world, everybody's holding something over everybody. And you had the whole program by the throat, and all you ever wanted was for 6 tired men to go home and live boring lives." She shook her head slowly. "I needed to come tell you in person that what you did mattered, that it was seen, even by someone who officially can't see anything. And the second reason is that you can stop carrying it now." She reached across the table and put her hand over his, and her hand was warmer than he remembered anything about her being. "You've been holding your breath for 14 months, Lieutenant, waiting for them to come for your men. I can see it on you. It's done now. They're safe. Really safe, not leverage safe. Safe because the thing that threatened them doesn't exist anymore. You can breathe." And Harper felt something let go in his chest that he hadn't known he'd been gripping. Something that had been clenched tight since a helicopter lifted off from a frozen valley, and to his own surprise, his eyes stung and he looked away toward the window, and he let himself for the first time in 14 months simply breathe. "Mitchell had a daughter," he said finally, his voice rough. "Named her middle name Sarah." Vance went very still. And then slowly something happened to her face that Harper had never seen in the valley, not once in all that cold and blood. Her eyes filled and one tear broke loose and tracked down a face that had watched men die from underneath the ice without flinching, and she wiped it away almost angrily, embarrassed by it. "That's not fair," she said, her voice cracking. "You can't just tell me that. I spent 6 years being a weapon, a tool. Nobody names a child after a weapon. They named her after a hero," Harper said, "because that's what you are. You spent 6 years being told you were a ghost, a thing that didn't exist. And in one night in one frozen valley, you were more real than anyone I have ever served with. You saved 6 men who had no claim on you. You handed me the one thing that could destroy the people who owned you, and you asked for nothing. That's the best of what we're supposed to be." He turned his hand over under hers and gripped it. "There's a little girl in Virginia Beach who's going to grow up carrying your name. You should meet her someday, when it's safe." Vance laughed, wet and broken and real. "I don't think ghosts get to go to birthday parties, Lieutenant. Maybe you're not a ghost anymore. Wraith is dead. The thing that made you disappear doesn't exist. So what's stopping you from surfacing, Vance? What's stopping you from coming up out of the water and staying up for good this time?" She was quiet for a long moment. "Kane asked me the same thing. Every day, for 14 months, in every place we hid. He kept saying we could stop, build something, have a life that isn't cold." She looked down at her cooling coffee. "I never believed him. I've been under the ice so long I forgot there was anything above it. But then I did the thing. I burned the program down. And this morning I woke up and there was nothing to hide from. No one hunting me, and I didn't know what to do with that. So I did the only thing that felt like it mattered. I got in a car and I drove here to tell the one man I ever met who reminded me what people are supposed to be, thank you, and to tell him his men are free." A pause. "And maybe I think to figure out if I get to be free, too." "You do," Harper said, and he said it with the full weight of a man who'd led people out of hell. "You come in, Vance, you surface, you let Kane build you that life. You go to a birthday party for a little girl who carries your name, and you eat cake, and you let yourself for once just be a person who did something good and gets to live in the world she saved. That's an order, warrant officer, and I outrank you in exactly nothing, but you're going to follow it anyway." Sarah Vance laughed again, And this time it was clean, and she wiped her eyes and she nodded, and something in her face that had been frozen for 6 years finally thawed. Okay, she said. Okay, Lieutenant. I'll come up. I'll stay up. She stood and left a bill on the table for the coffee and walked with Harper out into the parking lot, where the first gray light of dawn was just touching the edge of the swab. A truck was idling at the far end of the lot, and in the driver's seat, Harper could see the shape of a man he'd last seen wading into a frozen river. Kane lifted a hand in a small wave, alive, waiting. He came back for you, Harper said, in the valley. Everything else was tangled up, and I never knew whose side anyone was on. But that part was true, wasn't it? That part was always true, Vance said softly. It's the only thing that ever was the whole time. He came back for me. She looked toward the truck, and her face did the thing again, the softening. I spent so long thinking I was the last of my kind. Turns out I was never the last of anything. I just had to wait for someone brave enough to come down into the dark and tell me it was time to come up. She turned back and put out her hand, and he took it, and they shook two soldiers who'd survived a night the record said never happened. Thank you, Lieutenant, for keeping your word, for reminding me what we're supposed to be. Thank you, Vance, for coming up out of the river, for all of us. And then she walked across the parking lot in the growing light and climbed into the truck beside Marcus Kane. And Harper watched Kane reach over and take her hand, and the truck pulled out and turned toward the rising sun and drove away. Not disappearing this time, not sinking beneath any ice, just driving like two ordinary people going somewhere. Ordinary going home. A year later, on a bright afternoon in Virginia Beach, there was a birthday party in a backyard for a little girl turning 2. There were balloons and a lopsided cake and too many folding chairs, and 6 men who'd served together stood around a grill, telling lies about each other the way old teammates do. Mitchell's daughter toddled across the grass on the unsteady legs, and when she fell, she got back up because she was made of tough stuff, that one. And late in the afternoon, a truck pulled up at the curb, and a man and a woman got out, and the woman carried a small wrapped gift, and she walked up the driveway a little uncertainly, a woman unused to sunlight and backyards and children's laughter. Harper saw her and crossed the yard and put his arm around her shoulders and drew her into the noise and the warmth of it. Everybody, Harper called out, and the party quieted, and 6 men who'd survived a frozen valley turned to look. This is a friend of mine. Her name is Sarah. And Mitchell's little daughter, who carried that name in the middle of her own, looked up at the stranger with a 2-year-old's fearless curiosity and reached up her arms to be held. And Sarah Vance, who had spent 6 years being told she was a ghost, who had lived under the ice and killed in silence and saved everything while asking for nothing, knelt down in the grass and gathered the child up and held her and did not let go. The woman who had never surfaced long enough to be seen finally at last came all the way up into the light, and she stayed. She stayed for good. That was the ending she had earned, and the ending she had never once believed she would get, and it was against every cold and silent thing the world had ever tried to make her entirely and forever her own. The story could have ended there at the edge of that frozen river with Sarah Vance sinking back into the dark. But some stories refuse to stay buried, and some promises reach across years to collect what they're owed. It was 14 months later when Daniel Harper's phone rang at 2 a.m. He'd left the teams by then. Not all the way out, but out enough a training billet at Little Creek days that ended before dark nights that belonged to him and the small house he'd bought a mile from the water. He answered on the second ring the way men who've led other men in bad places always answer a late call, already awake, already braced. Lieutenant Harper, a voice said, female, steady, and something in his chest went tight before his mind even caught up. It's been a while. He sat up in the dark. Vance, warrant officer technically, still, though the record still says I don't exist, so make of that what you will. A pause, and he could hear her almost smile down the line. I need 10 minutes of your time, not on the phone. There's a diner off Route 60, the one with the blue sign. I'll be in the back booth. Come alone and come now because I won't be there long. The line went dead. Harper was dressed and in his truck in 4 minutes. The whole drive he told himself he was a fool, that this could be a trap, that a woman who'd walked into a frozen river to disappear had no business calling him at 2 a.m. But underneath all of it ran a current he couldn't fight, a thing he'd carried for 14 months without a name, and the name he realized as he pulled into the empty lot was Hope. He'd never known if she lived. And now, apparently, she had. She was in the back booth, exactly as she'd said, a coffee going cold in front of her, and she looked different than he remembered. Older. There was gray at her temples that hadn't been there in the valley, and a stillness to her that came from somewhere deep. But the eyes were the same level and clear and impossibly calm, the eyes of a woman who had spent her life in places humans weren't meant to survive and had survived them anyway. "You look terrible, Lieutenant," she said as he slid into the booth across from her. "Retirement doesn't suit you." "You look alive," Harper said, "which is more than I ever expected. We drank to you, you know, thought you were dead. My whole team we drank to the ghost who saved us." Something moved across her face. "I know. Kane told me." "Kane's alive too." "Kane's alive." She turned the coffee cup slowly in her hands. "It turns out two ghosts who know how to disappear are very hard to kill, even for the people who taught them how." She looked up. "That's part of why I'm here. The recording, Lieutenant. The one I gave you in the valley. The one you used to buy your men's lives." Harper went still. "What about it?" "It worked. Better than you'll ever know." Her voice dropped, and for the first time he heard something in it that wasn't iron. It was exhaustion, the bone-deep kind, the kind you earn. "You held that leverage over their heads for 14 months. Kept your men safe. Kept me and Kane breathing, because as long as they believed the recording was live, they couldn't move on any of us. But leverage like that, it's a stalemate. It doesn't end anything. It just freezes it. And a frozen war is still a war. I was tired of being frozen. So what did you do?" "I finished it." She reached into her jacket and set a folded newspaper on the table between them, and she slid it across, and Harper looked down at the headline, and his breath caught. "A defense contractor dissolved. 3 senior officers quietly retired. An internal review buried on page 11 using words like restructuring and oversight that meant nothing to a civilian and everything to a man who knew how to read between them." "That's Wraith," Harper said slowly. "That's the program. You burned it down." "I burned it down." Vance sat back. "Not the loud way, not the front page scandal way I threatened them with in the valley. I've learned that the loud way gets people like me killed and lets the guilty ones lawyer their way free. I did it the quiet way, the way ghosts do things. I took that recording and all the proof I'd spent 2 years and Kane spent 2 years gathering, and I gave it to exactly the right 3 people, the ones with the clearance and the spine to actually act on it. And they took the program apart from the inside one thread at a time until there was nothing left. No more kill orders. No more targets that weren't targets. No more operators sent into freezing water to murder journalists and bankers and be retired when they asked the wrong questions." Her jaw tightened. "It's over, Lieutenant. Wraith is dead. Really dead this time. Not the paper kind they gave Kane. The real kind." Harper stared at the newspaper and then at her. "Then why are you here? If it's over, if you won, why call me at 2 in the morning?" "2 reasons." Vance's eyes stayed on his. "The first is that you kept your word. For 14 months, you sat on the most dangerous recording in the country, and you never used it for yourself, never leaked it for glory, never traded it for a promotion or a pension or a book deal. You used it for exactly one thing, protecting your men. Do you know how rare that is, Lieutenant? In my world, everybody's holding something over everybody. And you had the whole program by the throat, and all you ever wanted was for 6 tired men to go home and live boring lives." She shook her head slowly. "I've spent my whole career around people who'd have sold you out for a parking spot. I needed to come tell you in person that what you did mattered, that it was seen, even by someone who officially can't see anything." Harper didn't trust himself to speak for a moment. "And the second reason. The second reason is that you can stop carrying it now." She reached across the table and put her hand over his, and her hand was warm, warmer than he remembered anything about her being, as if the woman who'd lived under the ice had finally come up into the sun. "You've been holding your breath for 14 months, Lieutenant, waiting for the other shoe, waiting for them to come for your men. I can see it on you. It's why retirement doesn't suit you. You never actually got out of that valley." Her voice softened. "It's done now. They're safe. Really safe. Not leverage safe, not stalemate safe. Safe because the thing that threatened them doesn't exist anymore. You can breathe. Your men can breathe. It's over." And Harper felt something let go in his chest that he hadn't known he'd been gripping. Something that had been clenched tight since the helicopter lifted off from a frozen valley. And to his own surprise, his eyes stung, and he looked away toward the window and the dark parking lot beyond it. And he let himself, for the first time in 14 months, simply breathe. Mitchell had a daughter, he said finally, his voice rough. Named her middle name Sarah. Vance went very still. And then slowly something happened to her face that Harper had never seen in the valley, not once, in all that cold and blood and impossible violence. Sarah Vance's eyes filled, and one tear broke loose and tracked down a face that had watched men die from underneath the ice without flinching, and she wiped it away almost angrily, embarrassed by it, this woman who'd been trained to feel nothing. "That's not fair," she said, her voice cracking. "You can't just tell me that. I spent 6 years being a weapon, a tool, a thing they pointed at people. Nobody names a child after a weapon." "They named her after a hero," Harper said. "Because that's what you were. That's what you are. You want to know the truth, Vance? You spent 6 years being told you were a ghost, a nothing, a thing that didn't exist. And in one night, in one frozen valley, you were more real than anyone I've ever served with. You saved 6 men who had no claim on you. You bled for us. You handed me the one thing that could destroy the people who owned you, and you asked for nothing. That's not a weapon. That's the best of what we're supposed to be." He turned his hand over under hers and gripped it. "There's a little girl in Virginia Beach who's going to grow up carrying your name. You should meet her someday. When it's safe. You should see what you saved." Vance laughed, wet and broken and real. "I don't think ghosts get to go to birthday parties, Lieutenant." "Maybe you're not a ghost anymore," Harper said. "You said it yourself. Wraith is dead. The program's gone. The thing that made you disappear doesn't exist. So what's stopping you from surfacing, Vance? What's stopping you from coming up out of the water and staying up for good this time?" She was quiet for a long moment. "Kane asked me the same thing," she said. "Every day for 14 months in every place we hid. He kept saying we could stop. We could come in, build something, have a life that isn't cold." She looked down at her cooling coffee. "I never believed him. I've been under the ice so long, I forgot there was anything above it. Forgot a person could just live without a mission, without a target, without waiting to be pointed at something." She raised her eyes. "But then I did the thing. I burned the program down. And this morning I woke up and there was nothing to hide from, no one hunting me, no one who wants me dead. And I didn't know what to do with that. So I did the only thing that felt like it mattered. I got in a car and I drove here and I called the one man I ever met who reminded me what people are supposed to be, to tell him thank you and to tell him his men are free." A pause. "And maybe I think to figure out if I get to be free too." "You do," Harper said, and he said it with the full weight of a man who'd led people out of hell and knew what freedom cost. "You earned it more than anyone I've ever known. You come in, Vance. You surface. You let Kane build you that life. You go to a birthday party for a little girl who carries your name, and you eat cake, and you let yourself, for once, just be a person who did something good and gets to live in the world she saved. That's an order, warrant officer, and I outrank you in exactly nothing, but you're going to follow it anyway." Sarah Vance laughed again, and this time it was clean, and she wiped her eyes and she nodded, and something in her face that had been frozen for 6 years finally thawed. "Okay," she said. "Okay, Lieutenant. I'll come up. I'll stay up." She stood, and she left a bill on the table for the coffee, and she walked with Harper out into the parking lot, where the first gray light of dawn was just touching the edge of the sky, and a truck was idling at the far end of the lot, and in the driver's seat, Harper could see the shape of a man he'd last seen wading into a frozen river. Kane lifted a hand in a small wave. Alive. Waiting. Patient in the way he'd always been. "He came back for you," Harper said. "In the valley. Everything else was tangled up, and I never knew whose side anyone was on. But that part was true, wasn't it? He faked his death, worked against his own program, spent 2 years in the cold, all to pull you out." "That part was always true," Vance said softly. "It's the only thing that ever was the whole time. He came back for me." She looked toward the truck, and her face did the thing again. The thawing, the softening, the look of a woman who'd been alone under the ice for years, discovering she wasn't alone at all. "I spent so long thinking I was the last of my kind. Turns out I was never the last of anything. I just had to wait for someone brave enough to come down into the dark and tell me it was time to come up. She turned back to Harper and put out her hand, and he took it, and they shook two soldiers who'd survived a night the record said never happened. "Thank you, Lieutenant," she said, "for keeping your word, for your men, for reminding me what we're supposed to be." "Thank you, Vance," Harper said, "for coming up out of the river, for all of us." And then she walked across the parking lot in the growing light, and she climbed into the truck beside Marcus Kane, and Harper watched Kane reach over and take her hand, and he watched the two of them sit there for a moment in the dawn, two ghosts who'd finally decided to stop being ghosts. And then the truck pulled out of the lot and turned toward the rising sun and drove away. Not disappearing this time, not sinking beneath any ice, just driving like two ordinary people going somewhere, ordinary going home. Harper stood alone in the parking lot as the sky brightened, and he breathed the cold morning air all the way down into his lungs, and for the first time since a helicopter had lifted him out of a frozen valley, the hand that had been pressing on the back of his neck was gone. A year later, on a bright afternoon in Virginia Beach, there was a birthday party in a backyard for a little girl turning 2. There were balloons and a lopsided cake and too many folding chairs, and 6 men who'd served together stood around a grill, telling lies about each other the way old teammates do. Mitchell's daughter toddled across the grass on unsteady legs, and the whole party watched her the way people watch something precious. And when she fell, she got back up, because she was made of tough stuff, that one. And late in the afternoon, a truck pulled up at the curb, and a man and a woman got out, and the woman carried a small wrapped gift, and she walked up the driveway, a little uncertainly, a woman unused to sunlight and backyards and children's laughter. And Harper saw her, and he crossed the yard and put his arm around her shoulders and drew her into the noise and the warmth and the life of it. "Everybody," Harper called out, and the party quieted, and 6 men who'd survived a frozen valley turned to look. "This is a friend of mine. Her name is Sarah." And Mitchell's little daughter, who carried that name in the middle of her own, looked up at the stranger with a 2-year-old's fearless curiosity and reached up her arms to be held. And Sarah Vance, who had spent 6 years being told she was a ghost, who had lived under the ice and killed in silence, and saved everything while asking for nothing, knelt down in the grass and gathered the child up and held her and did not let go. And the woman who had never surfaced long enough to be seen finally at last came all the way up into the light, and she stayed. She stayed for good, and that was the ending she had earned, and the ending she had never once believed she would get, and the ending that was against every cold and silent thing the world had ever tried to make her entirely and forever her own.